Hello painters, and welcome to demo number 2 for project number 1, your still life. So last week you arranged your still life with the goal of creating it balanced and starting to tell a story through your symbolism and through your setup. And so my still life is right there, but here's the picture so that you can see it. But I'm looking at it while I paint, which is really important. You worked on the lighting of the still life, and then you sketched it on your canvas. You can see I used watercolor paper and it's starting to warp, so that's one of the good things about canvases is they won't warp. And they'll take a kind of a painting beating much better than the watercolor paper will. But I sketched it so that it sort of filled the frame as much as possible in a nice way. And then I painted in my background. And then I worked on painting kind of the very basic values, sort of a medium dark, a dark, medium light, and a light. So what I'm going to do now is I've got white and black. I'm going to mix up just a range, much more than 4, a range of values. And I'm gonna start working on all these things, and I wanna turn this into as realistic a black and white painting as possible. And it's just gonna take some time. And some of it will have to do with mixing and dabbing a bunch of different types, a bunch of different values, and some of it will have to do with doing a layer, letting it dry, doing another layer, letting it dry. So it's a little give and take of both of those things. And you will get to watch it happen. So first thing, I'm just going to mix up a bunch of values. So all I have is white, black, and retarder on here. And I'm probably, when I paint, I'm probably going to add a little bit of water just to remember to keep all your layers thin. You don't want it to be chunky and bumpy. You want to really keep everything thin. Okay, so I have 6 different values from dark to light mixed up here. I still have my black and my white. And the reality is I'll probably like keep mixing as I go to create even more nuance and gradation from dark to light on my painting. I've got medium to small brushes here because I have medium to small areas I need to paint here, and there's nothing in here that makes me want to use a larger brush. This will give the smaller brushes give me more control over smaller areas. Now, as I think about value in paint, one of the goals is we want it to be sort of realistically black and white. We are going for dramatic lighting, so we want high contrast between lights and darks, but we also want the range of values in between. However, there's a couple things that we want to err a little bit on the lighter side rather than the darker side. One of those things is because acrylic paint dries darker than it initially goes on wet. So when you put it on wet and you're like, or you mix up the paint, you're like, that's a great color, and then you put it on the paper and then it dries a little bit darker, is always a little bit of a shock to people. Also, because our end goal is to add color, so we're going to be glazing color. That means we make transparent color and we put it over the top. It'd be almost like if we take a tinted window and put it over the top of this, and suddenly it just adds color to the three-dimensionality that you've already produced in your value range. And anytime you kind of add another layer, it's going to make it darker, right? So if we push this a little bit light when we add color, it'll turn into the right sense of light to dark. Yeah, if I haven't explained that before, the goal with all these values is to create three-dimensional form, to make it look realistic, like it is an actual three-dimensional object in space. And we do that just through controlling the lights and the darks. That's what it's the shadows, the lights and the darks that make things look three-dimensional. And again, I'm going to try to keep things as thin as possible. I'm going to start with the otter and then go from there, and we'll see how this goes. Okay, so I've just spent quite a bit of time working on the values to create three-dimensional form. I feel like I've done a pretty good job initially, but I actually am going to go back in and just highlight a few more details, see if I can get some more textures. And you'll notice like the eyes and the drawn in face and some of the lines on the boat I've saved. You want to make sure the value in the background for details like that, like especially this face, you want to get the value in the background perfect and then just draw those details on with a very thin paintbrush at the very end. As I was drawing, I noticed that I'd forgotten to do the cast shadows, so I'm going to want to do another layer. You'll notice, especially like with the fish, the boat, all of these I like did a layer and then I kind of went back in and kept painting over it. So at this point, there's anywhere from 3 to 4, even 5 layers on all aspects of these objects. And I'm going to do even more. Now, when I say add another layer, it doesn't necessarily mean paint over the whole thing. Sometimes it does. But it could just mean like I want to go in and I want to like make a better highlight there so that face looks more round and maybe make it a little bit darker on the edge. Maybe I want to like smooth out that weird transition right there on that fish. When I say like keep painting layers, it means like identify the areas that are problem areas and kind of keep working on those areas. And then when I feel good, I'm going to do those details. Another thing you might have noticed is that when I had an edge that was bothering me, I took a brush that was clean and dry and kind of pushed that paint back in with that clean dry brush. Or if I wanted to blend a light to a dark area, again, I took that clean dry brush. As long as the paint was still wet, I could kind of blend it out a little bit easier than with the paintbrush that was full of wet paint. So that clean dry brush can be a clean dry soft brush, should I say, make sure it's not a hard brush, can be a really helpful tool in moving paint around that's already on your canvas. So here I go back in for a few more final details. Again, like the more that I can let this dry and then go back in, the better. And my goal again is to get this as kind of realistic looking as possible before I put the color on. Now, one thing as I'm looking at this, I feel like I could push all of this a little bit lighter, so I might try to do that. Mix up a kind of a white, but mix it with some water or some medium so that it's not like pure white, and then just kind of bring some areas a little bit lighter again so that the final painting doesn't feel too dark. So I'm going to keep pushing everything a little bit lighter and a few more details, and yeah, that's the goal. We'll see what happens. Anytime that you get close to being done or you're stuck, it's really good to just take a step back and look at your painting. Often you'll see things that need to do, so I've done that a couple times. You'll notice I did break out pure black and pure white in a couple areas, and I still think that eye needs to be fixed, but some of those tiny perfect details will also be able to do at the very end of the painting. So I'm going to call this good so that I can get this edited and posted for you, so you can watch it on time. Notice how much mixing has ended up on my palettes in order to get the range of values. It's not just dark and light, like there's gradation and mixing, all of those ranges that has happened. But I feel pretty good about this. So we'll call it, you know, nothing's perfect, but we'll call it good for now.